Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you to ISJ for having me here today. I'm Howard Leedham, as John said, and out of the slides of the next 15 minutes, this is probably the only one that I really don't care if you forget or not. Because hopefully, over the next 15 minutes, I'm going to impart some thoughts on leadership that in a month, a year, 10 years' time, you might think, that guy whose name I can't remember, what did he say about this? And apply it to what you're doing. And it's all very on the human element. So in our sector, it's quite unusual because leadership permeates every level for us, from the gate guard to the CEO. At some stage, we're all required to impart some leadership. There's an expectation of leadership from our clients, from us. And also, we have to deal with crisis response and the fight, flight, or freeze leadership decisions. So I'm just going to discuss over the next 15 minutes what is leadership, why does it matter, and why is the style important for you as a leader. And when you think of a good leadership and the role models, who do you think of? So I'd like you to think about that now. Who in your life have you thought, yeah, that was a really good leader, and you sort of reflect back on him? Because I'll come back on that a bit later, so try and hold that thought. Wisdom is getting it right before the event. Experience is getting it wrong, learning, and getting it right in subsequent events. All I can say is that I've been short on wisdom, but out of the experience is that I started off as a clearance diver, became a leading diver, and then became a commando pilot. I then went into special forces. I then left the military and became chief pilot and VP of an executive business jet company. I then ended up being number 2 in a $4 billion hedge fund. So I've managed to have some experience in not getting it right a few times. And more latterly, what I did is during COVID, I decided to try and take an academic view on this, and I ended up doing a master's in strategic leadership to try and learn why I might have got some things wrong in the past. So when we go to the nuts and bolts of leadership, what is leadership? And it's the ability to influence others to follow a direction or aim that they might not otherwise desire to take. And when I'm giving this sort of lecture to students, what I do is I stand there and I go, okay, can everybody stand up? And then can everybody sit down? And they stand up and they sit down. I say, well, look, that's leadership. I just made you do something that that you wouldn't have otherwise done, and you either did it willingly or unwillingly. So that is the nub of leadership. Now, some of you may have seen this before. It's a DARES leadership matrix, and it's all about when you're a leader, you look at the task, the team, and the individual. So you've got the task to do. You need to put the right team together, and you need to do the task, and you need to also take into account the needs of the individual within that team. Now, what a lot of people don't appreciate when they look at this matrix is that things move. And so, for instance, in this one, where the individual slips out, it could be something, some guy's wife is having a baby, or your team is storming a well-defended building and you know you might lose a couple of guys. And so as a leader, you have to say, right, okay, I've moved that individual circle out of the matrix because of this, that, or the other. But the most important thing with the movement of these circles, and they'll very seldom be interlocked in equilibrium, is that you know where the circles are. So in other words, if an individual is pulling out from the team or the task, and you don't want him to, then you know you've got to get him back in. And the same if the team is not cohesive and getting the task done, you know you've got to pull that circle back in to get it done. And you've got to use an objective leadership talent in order to do that. But if you don't know where those circles are in the first place, then how can you get them in the right place, or how can you get them where you want them to be? Now, styles of leadership. You, as leaders in your companies, are all there because somebody who interviewed you or promoted you thought, right, your leadership style is going to improve the bottom line of the company. That's it. Because if it doesn't, why are you there? You're not there for a hobby, for sure. So the style is really important. Now, I interviewed over directors from 69 companies and talked about the styles of leadership. And 80% of the surveyed directors knew their style, but they couldn't classify it. However, once I described the style, they said, yeah, that's me. They could tell which style was dominant. And 100% then afterwards had an opinion on the most effective style in business. All of you in this room are one of these. You're either transactional, transformational, situational, laissez-faire, or autocratic. And it matters. And the reason it matters, because if you're a transactional leader, is that it pretty much says what is on the tin. You've got maintenance of aim. I pay you to do a job. You do the job. If you do it well, you keep your job, or you get promoted, or you get paid more. If you don't do it well, I'm sorry, we've got to part ways. And in simple terms, that's a transactional leader. It's maintenance of the aim. And the link with transactional leaders is actually transactional leaders mitigate risk to a company. That's an important point. Or you're a transformational leader. You influence others beyond their immediate self-interest to identify the needed change, creative vision to guide a change through inspiration. So in other words, what you're doing is saying, look, just put the needs of the company before yourself, and you know what, everything will be great, and we're gonna move on, and we're gonna make progress. But the problem is with transformational leaders, although very popular, and I wouldn't mind betting that most of you, of the leader that you were thinking of, that you thought, yeah, a really good leader, was a transformational leader, is that they introduce risk to a business because they're not necessarily concentrating on maintenance of aim, and they like to do other things and create other things. And that can introduce risk to a company or indeed a team. The rare leader is a situational leader, and he or she can flip between the two and change their style according to the situation. But like I say, they're generally quite rare. And then the two that don't warrant their own slide, that are both considered most disastrous by the 69 directors, 100% of the 69 directors that I interviewed, were the laissez-faire, I don't know, and I don't care, just pay me, or the autocratic that doesn't take any notice of anybody else around him and just makes his own decisions and makes life a misery for the people around him. So as I was saying, with style comes risk, and the risk appetite of your company will rely on the predominant style of leadership within it. So if you have an entirely transactional leadership team, yes, you may not deviate from the main mission, but do you know what? Your risk is going to be contained. If you've got an all-transformational team, then you're going to deviate, and the risk to stakeholders increases significantly. And this is the reason why diversity is probably key in any company, because you don't want all of either. So you want to, with roles, for instance, if you've got a transformational CEO, you probably want a good few transactional leaders on the team as well. And in my opinion, we talk about diversity in gender, in culture, in age, but actually, when the rubber hits the road, it's the diversity of the leadership style within your team that depends on success or failure and the amount of risk that is applied to what you're doing on a day-to-day basis so far as the business is concerned. And that is the rub. Now, we talk about leadership and competence, and I can go through this list here. of everything that a leader should have according to Adair, who made that matrix earlier on. So enthusiasm, confidence, toughness, integrity, warmth, humility. And when I say those key words, you can ask yourself whether you've got those things or not. Because the key to being a good leader also is being self-aware. You've got to be look in the mirror and go, right, where am I with this? Where are my circles? How am I doing? As I said here, if you're the smartest man in the room, you're invariably not. And the airline industry has proved this because it used to be the captain of an airplane was God. And then after a few crashes and several decades, they said, no, we've got to do cockpit resource management, where the captain is no longer God. He says, what do you think? And then he'll get the co-pilot to put input, and the co-pilot might indeed be smarter than the captain. I also put here, arrogance endears itself to no one. And we've seen this in the news and headlines with politicians and businessmen, where arrogance overtakes them, and it comes back, and it bites them in the backside. Because when people get arrogant, nobody wants to save them. Everybody's glad to see them fall under the bus. There's no I in team, and that comes back to Adair's matrix. And then the other thing I put here is the Lawrence adaptability, and this is Lawrence of Arabia, T. Lawrence. His art in adaptability was that he had the art to speak to a prince or a pauper at eye level in exactly the same manner that the person that he was speaking to expected. And of course, he made tremendous progress with what he did in just 2 years of his life. And then finally, the waiter rule, which was something that Hemingway came up with. He said, you can judge a man or a woman by the way he treats, you can judge the measure of a man by the way he treats a waiter. And it's same with your team. If you treat people with respect, you're going to get more out of them. And the golden rule with waiters is, of course, never be rude to them before you get your food. Okay, why do leaders fail? This is a list here. You can see they ignore the need for change. They have the wrong vision. So and again, you get the wrong transformational leader with the wrong vision. You're going to go off course. Or with transactional, they might get too close to their companies, too insular, arrogant attitudes, and reverting to old formula. But at the bottom there, I hope you can see that, is that your plan and the reality. To be a leader, you have to be an optimist, because when you set out on anything, it's never going to be as easy as you think it's going to be. But if you knew how difficult it was going to be, then you'd never do it in the first place. Okay, in summary then, the core elements of effective leadership. There's the list. I think the key here is the right people, diversity, competence, and membership stability. And an appropriate team climate. Because if you've got the right team to get the job done, it's going to get done. The 5 helpful hints that I would put forward is that you've got to be afraid of failure, and we all are. Make a decision. Okay, it doesn't matter actually if you have to change the decision. But as you know, when you've been followers, the worst thing that you can have is a leader that will not make a decision. So make a decision, go on the course. If you have to change course, change it. Know your style. Know if you're transformational. Know if you're transactional. Know if you're situational. And adapt accordingly. And know that you have to surround yourself with people that aren't necessarily like you. I always say, stay as fit as life will let you. It's a statement obvious, but it helps you respect yourself, and it helps other people respect you. And finally, lead, follow, or get out of the way. As a leader, you like to lead. But when you're not leading, it's your duty to try and help your leader to do the best that he can and be a good follower. And that is part of being a good leader too. So, that concludes, I hope that I've imparted a few pearls of wisdom there, and that there'll be some of that stuff that will come in useful, and you'll remember in a month, a year, or maybe a decade, but you can forget this slide. Thanks very much.